rioting in the streets, unelected government, and the demand for forced austerity from foreign powers. With the situation in Greece reaching new levels of crisis, we'll be talking to former editor of Redbrick, Samuel Lear, about the economic chaos, amongst other topics. It's the 26th of February. Welcome to the Sunday edition.
Good afternoon. Later we'll be joined by the Guild's Women's Officer, Kelly Rogers. First, this week's headlines. Home Secretary Theresa May has said the UK Border Agency will be split into two. The announcement on Monday follows revelations that thousands of people were let into the country without appropriate checks. The driver of a coach that crashed in France, killing a teacher, is currently under investigation over an allegation of involuntary manslaughter. Greece avoided a nightmare situation on Tuesday as ministers agreed to a €130 billion bailout deal. Two examiners at the OCR exam board were sacked for giving too much information about forthcoming papers to both pupils and teachers. Two prominent Western journalists were killed in the Syrian city of Homs. Sunday Times reporter Marie Colvin and award-winning French photographer Remy Olchlik died when a shell hit the Baba Ama district on Wednesday. Search teams found 8 more bodies in the wreck of the cruise ship Costa Concordia, which capsized on January 13th. Labour MP Eric Joyce has been charged with 3 counts of common assault following a disturbance at the House of Commons. The Falkirk MP was arrested after police were called to a bar at Parliament on Wednesday evening. United Nations investigators have accused the Syrian regime of crimes against humanity, indicating that President Assad himself should face prosecution. This is the strongest indicator yet of the UN's views on the Syrian situation. Lloyds Banking Group made a loss of £3.5 billion during 2011, it was announced on Friday. This was after setting aside £3.2 billion to cover payment protection insurance claims. A man has pleaded guilty to starting a fire which destroyed a 144-year-old furniture shop in South London during last summer's riots. Gordon Thompson, aged 33, changed his plea during a trial at the Old Bailey. In Guild and University news this week, Vice President for Education Ed Bauer has been found not guilty of intentionally causing danger to the public and conspiring to do so with others. The question time debate between the Vice-Chancellor and the Guild President has been postponed because of the impact of the campus protest last week. Those were this week's headlines. And now, over to Owen.
Thank you, Freddie. We're now joined by Samuel Lear, Guild Councillor, Vice President for Lawford on Law Society and former editor of Redbrick. First of all, we'll discuss Greece. Sam, do you think that Greece should pull out of the euro?
No, not yet. I think there's still a lot of uncertainty about what's likely to happen in the future. We're in unprecedented times, and I think currently, whilst bailouts are still ongoing, I think it's a bit premature to ask them to leave the euro. But there needs to be extensive measures to ensure that they can continue to grow.
Is forcing austerity on the Greek people fair, or is it just what the banks want?
I think it's primarily what the banks want. However, austerity measures in the past have proven to be a good measure of maintaining long-term growth. Particularly, we can use this country as an example. In the early 90s, Black Wednesday was perceived as being an absolute disaster, but that ensured.
To be fair, we're in a different situation to Greece. I mean, we can make the sacrifice.
You've got the example of cutting too far, and that it's the fact you've got rioters on the streets, bins haven't been collected for months on end, that kind of thing. It's not. They've gone too far now, and I don't know what the solution is for $1 million question, but it's.
They could probably do with $1 million.
Yeah.
To be fair.
Well, no, you've hit the nail on the head. No one knows how to sort this. We've never been in this position before, but to just leave them to their own devices, that I can't see that solving any problems. I think
No, they certainly need a lot of help, yeah.
the European community does need to help them where possible.
Do you think that having this technocratic government in power is actually helping? Or do you think they need to be democratically elected, as most of the Greek people want?
On principle, I would always urge for democracy. However, I don't see this technocrat being involved in sort of political matters. It's more an economic sort of overseer of ensuring that Greece fulfill their duties as part of this bailout package.
I think though the Greeks do see him as more than just economics. It's more of an issue than just the economic problem, I think.
But it again, what should happen? The EU are providing sort of money for Greece to attempt to at least solve the problems, and the cost of that is having their own man on the inside.
Yeah.
Obviously, the Greek crisis has been in the news for quite a long time now. Do we think that the problems can get any more worse before they get better?
I'm not an economist, but I can't see it getting any better in the near future. I don't think anyone is predicting that. And it will require further bailout packages in the future. I'm absolutely certain of that. The key will be to see how far Germany in particular are willing to sort of continue to pump money into Greece, and whether Greece will have to completely default and be left to their own devices.
I struggle to see how it can actually get worse. In the recent bailout package, the most recent bailout package, they were scrabbling around to find around 300 million euros to have a 130 billion bailout deal. If they're struggling for what is petty cash to other governments, we all know, in a complete mess. Really.
I think it can get much worse. We're seeing rioting on the streets all the time, and it's only getting worse as more people are pushed out of work, become unemployed. Desperation will only perpetuate it. It's quite similar. I don't want to draw parallels to 1920s Germany, but history has shown how dictatorships emerge from desperate circumstances such as this, which is why I think there's a duty of Europe to assist Greece where they possibly can.
We'll move on to your views on the current state of the Guild. What do you make of the reported division amongst sabbatical officers over the recent protest on the front page of Redbrick this week?
I think a lot is made on team unity, and I think that is played up to being more important than it actually is. I think that it's important that our elected representatives stick to their own views, whether that is one side or the other. I think in many ways it's healthy to have this debate. And on this issue, because it is such a subjective issue, I don't think there are any objective problems with this at all, but it's so subjective, and I quite like to see this debate being had.
Talk about the debate. A lot of it has happened on the Better Guild forum on Facebook.
Yeah.
Do you think people are abusing that forum?
Absolutely, and in many ways I hope it gets taken down, because it's been abused by so many people in so many different ways. It's causing significant damage to the Guild's reputation. It's not accessible for the wider student body at all. The problem with the Guild in general is that it is so esoteric. People don't feel included within the Guild. It's very much seen as a big club, and that has got to change, I think.
You've been part of the Reclaim the Guild campaign since it was set up. How do you feel it's going?
I'm not happy with the way it's going currently. I think it started off as being a group that will seek to represent all students from a variety of backgrounds. And I have a feeling that it's been hijacked by a minority opinion. And I don't think it is, again, I don't think it's accessible to the wider student population. I don't think it's been marketed in a particularly strong way either. I think people are confused about what it stands for, and the message isn't that clear, and it needs to be simplified. And on the other hand, I do support the idea of a general meeting. I think that the Guild should have a trustee board that is majority student-led, And I'm hoping that will be the consequence of this campaign, but I'm a bit worried about the course it's taking.
The manifestos of the candidates for guild officers released in Redbrick this week. Are you looking forward to the guild elections?
Absolutely. It's the best time of the year, I think. Campus becomes a beautiful, colourful sea of cardboard and all sorts. No, I'm really looking forward to it. And no, I hope people have fun with this, and I hope it continues to be led in a very good spirit. Yeah, and I hope that students are captivated by it and become interested in the guild again.
How about you, Freddie? Are you looking forward to it?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how vote match will affect the overall voting turnout, as to whether it actually will increase it or whether it's just all been a waste of time. We'll find out in a few weeks' time whether that is the case. I hope it increases voter turnout. I hope we get all 28,000 students voting. That's never going to happen at the end of the day, but I hope it does at least increase it. Yeah.
Okay, Sam Lear, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
We're now joined by Kelly Rogers, the women's officer. First of all, it was International Women's Week this week. How did you feel it went?
Yeah, we had like a whole sort of range of events. The turnout maybe hasn't been as good as it could have been, but you know, that's probably, it's the first time I've ever done anything like this. It's the first time lots of us have ever done this. It's been a really good learning curve. But the events were absolutely amazing. Like, we had lots of lectures with some really great lecturers from the Gender Studies department who were talking about like things like post-feminism, about sort of women's liberation in the 60s, about sexuality in Jewish communities. Like, we've had a really sort of wide range of stuff. On the Tuesday night, we had our protest against Miss Undergraduate of Birmingham, which went really, really well. We had quite a big turnout for that. We had sort of about 30 to 40 people there. And we got like really good reactions from the sort of the passers-by, and you know, had some really interesting debates with the customers.
Where in Birmingham did you hold that?
Outside Chameleon Bar, which is where it was held. So we went outside the club, and yeah, no, it was really good. It was really fun.
Considering things like the Miss Undergraduate protests and so on, do you think there's a real problem with women's representation at the University of Birmingham?
I think you only have to really look at the sort of the candidates for the upcoming elections to like see a sort of, you know, a microcosm of like the larger problem. Like, I was talking about this with one of my lecturers the other day. Like, how do we get sort of women involved in politics and guild politics, or how do we get them sort of engaging in sort of democratic structures? Because I mean, I'm under the impression that women, there's a lot of women in sort of like the societies and committees and stuff like that. It's not like we're frightened of leadership or incapable of leadership, but then when it comes to sort of running for SAB positions, or we've only got a few this year, and there's a chance we might have an all-male SAB team, which I think would be really bad. And my lecturer was saying that, you know, at all the events that he holds, like big lectures and stuff, you know, questions nearly always come from male students. I think it's sort of, female representation is, I think, a result, like, or lack of female representation is a result of, I don't know, just the fact that universities or everywhere is a sort of like or guild politics is like a male-dominated scene, and if you don't see men participate, if you don't see women participating, then there's no sort of like, there's no impetus for you to sort of join up. I know it's like a really tricky thing, which I haven't really thought about that into much depth yet, because it's like really complicated, but I think there's definitely ways that we can improve it, like women's leadership programs by the NUS is something I've been thinking about. But
do you think that there'll come a time soon at the Guild where the role of women's officer will no longer be needed?
Soon, no. Hopefully, eventually.
Do you think you're on the right path to that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, everyone can see that over the last, you know, decade even, there's been like massive changes. But I mean, I don't see the sort of, there's an argument that like university is a relatively safe space, a relatively like good place for women and for all sort of like associations and liberation groups. But I don't think the Guild's role should be limited only to the university. So even if we achieve perfect equality on campus, there's still issues elsewhere out in the national, like on the national scene, national politics, that we should be intervening in, we should be like adding to, because, you know, this is our chance as students to like get involved in like national politics. And so I think until there is perfect gender equality, which I think is a long way off, then the women's officer is going to be a very valuable role.
You mentioned safe spaces in your answer there. You campaigned recently for safe spaces in the Guild for liberation groups. If that had passed at Guild Council, where would men have gone if they needed a safe space?
Look, I mean, this is a sort of the questions that have always been asked to me, like, why isn't there a men's officer, for example, or, you know, this sort of thing. The idea is that liberation groups are particularly disempowered groups, or they have fundamental inequalities, like, as groups compared to the rest of society, which are, like, socially and historically, like, engendered. And, you know, like, the liberation officers and liberation rooms are there to, like, or the potential liberation rooms are there to sort of address that. Like, there's always places we could go. Like, I'm not saying we're, like, left adrift just because we don't have liberation rooms. Like, there are always places you can go. You can go to welfare officers, you can go to harassment advisors, you can go to your SAB team, you can go to your lecturers. But the point of, not only was it for a safe space, but I think liberation rooms would have been great because it's like a place for groups to call their own, where they can organise and where they can sort of collectively discuss things. That can be an empowering experience, as well as sort of like a place where they can go off for a safe space if they need it.
On that point, obviously what I'm about to say isn't comparable to some of the discrimination that liberation groups might feel. But do you not think that there's a problem that some men might feel intimidated that they can't speak out on these kinds of issues without offending people, simply because they're men? I don't know. That hasn't stopped them so far, but I guess that's, you know, that's only a few. But I would always argue for liberation sort of autonomy, because I think that it's like, it's a matter of subjectivity, it's a matter of like being there and being part of it to understand what sort of discrimination feels like. But what I do think is important, especially for sort of something like my role and gender equality, gender inequality, like that does affect men as well. And I have always tried to encourage men to get involved. Like a lot of men came to the Miss Undergraduate protest, for example, because, you know, sexual objectification and sort of gender stereotypes affect men as well. I don't know about them feeling unable to challenge us, but to be honest, liberation associations should have a sense of autonomy. They should have the right to choose themselves. On a wider point, David Cameron recently proposed to ensure that 30% of every boardroom is made up of women. Do you think this is simply patronising, or do you think this will help women's liberation?
I think it's a good thing. You know, it's a big problem that sort of women, like, this is something that's definitely going to affect women at this university, because graduate prospects for women are much lower. Like, although we sort of achieve higher at degree level, at undergraduate degree level, much fewer go on to sort of postgraduate degrees of PhDs. They're sort of successful for a few years, but then when they sort of have children, lots of women tend to go into part-time jobs. They tend to having to, like, give up their career paths, give up their ambitions. You know, just having a quota to fill boardrooms isn't really going to achieve much, I don't think, because it doesn't, like, challenge the sort of fundamental, like, some of the real problems that are causing the issues, like, you know, flexibility of working hours, which would help people work around sort of childcare, or paternity leave and maternity leave imbalance, and changing the sort of burden of childcare from not only women but both parents and sort of thing. Like, these are the sort of things that would get women into the boardroom. But, you know, a quota's a good start, and you know, if we genuinely want equality, we want financial independence, then, you know, women should be able to be in positions of power just like men. So I think it's a good start.
Well, thank you very much, Kelly. Next week, we'll be holding a hustings with all the candidates for the President of the Guild of Students. Until then, goodbye.